Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. So today we are tackling this massive modern paradox. You know the feeling, right? We are constantly busy, we're perpetually connected, pinging back and forth faster than ever before, but then 5 o'clock rolls around and you look back at your day and think, wait, what did I actually get done? If you've ever felt that exhausting gap between your sheer activity level and your meaningful output, trust me, you are not alone. So let's jump right into the science and the systems of how we can actually reclaim our focus.
Here is our roadmap for today. We are going to diagnose the crisis of distraction, figure out exactly what deep work is compared to a flow state, build what we call a remote focus architecture, take a look at some valid critiques of all this, and then, most importantly, build your own sustainable focus system. Let's get to it.
All right, starting us off, the crisis of distraction.
Okay, the sheer scale of our attention drop is honestly staggering. According to research by Dr. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine, back in 2004, the average attention span on a screen was 2.5 minutes. Today, it has plummeted to just 47 seconds. That's literally less than a minute. We're essentially trading the deep focus our brains were biologically designed for this constant state of rapid context switching. And look, it's really important to get this. This is a systemic, biological failure of our modern environment. It is absolutely not a personal lack of discipline on your part.
And compounding that biological failure is just how our jobs are structured now. Recent data shows that professionals today spend a whopping 85% of their day in meetings, on emails, or putting out immediate fires. It's wild. It creates this incredibly dangerous illusion of productivity. We feel like we're doing a lot, but our actual meaningful output just tanks. Basically, we've become reactive processors of demands rather than proactive creators of value.
Which brings us to a concept from Dr. Sophie Leroy called attention residue. Think of it like this. When you switch from writing a really complex report to just checking a quick Slack message, your brain doesn't completely make the jump. Fragments of that previous task, or even just the stress of the message you just read, kind of stick around and occupy your mental bandwidth. This residue can actually reduce your cognitive effectiveness on your current task by up to 40%. You are quite literally trying to work with less than half of your brain.
To put a human face to this data, let's look at Elena. Her story was featured in a recent academic paper in the Partners Universal International Innovation Journal. Elena is a financial analyst, and she literally has to wake up at 5 a.m. just to do her actual job. Why? Because her standard 9 to 5 is entirely swallowed up by meetings and emails. This is classic schedule overwhelm. Professionals everywhere are pushing their most critical, brain-heavy work into their personal off-the-clock hours, just to survive the noise of the workday. It's a real problem.
So that brings us to part 2. What exactly is deep work? Cal Newport defines deep work as those professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit. This is the stuff that creates brand new value, and it's really hard to replicate. On the flip side, you have shallow work. That's the non-cognitively demanding logistical stuff like answering routine emails that you can pretty much do while distracted. Newport's core economic argument here is a game changer. Because our world is getting incredibly distracted, the ability to actually sit down and do deep work is becoming rare. And because it's rare, it is becoming a massive competitive advantage.
Newport actually outlines 4 different philosophies for scheduling this kind of depth. You've got the monastic approach, which is radical isolation. Think of a novelist going totally off-grid. Then there's bimodal, where you divide your time into deep weeks and shallow weeks. The journalistic approach is more opportunistic, where you just grab focus whenever a window naturally opens up. But honestly, for most of us knowledge workers, the rhythmic philosophy is the absolute gold standard. By setting deep work as a fixed daily habit, let's say every morning from 8 to 10 a.m., you totally eliminate the decision fatigue of trying to figure out when to focus. You just lock into the rhythm.
Moving on to part 3, deep work versus flow state.
Now, there's a really vital difference here that trips a lot of people up. Deep work is a deliberate practice. You put it on the calendar, you sit down, and you execute it using sheer willpower, even and especially when it feels hard or slow or just plain boring. Flow state, on the other hand, which was first identified by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, is a spontaneous psychological state of effortless absorption. The catch is, you cannot force flow. If you sit down to do deep work and just sort of wait for flow to magically arrive, you're going to end up really frustrated. Think of it this way. Deep work creates the conditions for flow to happen. But a hard, grinding 2-hour session that produces solid output is still a wildly successful deep work session, for sure, even if that magical flow state never actually showed up.
All right, part 4, the remote focus architecture.
So remote work didn't really cure distraction, right? It just changed the location, from noisy coworkers to noisy pets. To actually protect your concentration at home, you need what we call a 3-layered remote focus architecture. First up, your physical environment. You need a dedicated zone, even if it's just a specific chair in the corner, that signals to your brain, okay, it's time to work. Second, digital barriers. Research actually shows that just having your phone sitting face down on your desk drains your cognitive capacity. Crazy, right? You have to silence those notifications and physically move the phone away. And third, and this is the one people always skip, social contracts. You have to explicitly communicate your focus blocks to your team and anyone you live with so they know exactly when you're off limits and exactly when you'll be back.
And to really glue this architecture together, we have to replace the psychological boundary of the old daily commute. We do this with a transition ritual, which acts as environmental priming. It's super simple. By doing the exact same thing every single time before you start a deep work block, maybe it's brewing a specific type of coffee, putting on a certain instrumental playlist, or just taking a quick 5-minute walk, you drastically lower the cognitive startup cost. Your brain recognizes the cue and automatically thinks, I know what we're doing, and begins shifting gears right into focus mode.
Which brings us to Section 5, Privilege, Critiques, and Constraints.
Now, it's incredibly important that we look at how these concepts are actually received out in the real world. For instance, the Pretty Terrible blog brings up a really strong critique of Newport's work, pointing out that it operates from a place of pretty intense privilege. Their argument is that brushing off administrative tasks as shallow or somehow inherently less valuable totally ignores reality. Because, let's be honest, that crucial everyday labor is exactly what allows executives and academics the luxury of locking themselves away in a room to think big thoughts. It's a very valid perspective to keep in mind. Deep work very often relies on the unacknowledged support work of other people.
On top of that, those rigid 2 to 4 hour blocks Newport suggests, they aren't realistic for everybody. But the beauty of this framework is that it can absolutely be adapted. For parents or caregivers, this might mean trading those massive blocks for shorter, much more flexible windows that align with nap times or bedtimes, maybe 3 45-minute sessions instead of one long one. Or, for professionals with ADHD, Dr. Russell Barkley's research suggests that the core challenge is sustaining effort over long periods, so adapting to high-frequency, tightly bounded 45-minute sprints, paired with those transition rituals we talked about, works with your brain's natural constraints rather than fighting against them. And finally, Section 6. Building your focus system.
Okay, this piece of data should honestly give you a ton of relief. Research into deliberate practice shows that even the most elite performers in the world, we're talking world-class violinists, chess grandmasters, you name it, max out at about 4 hours of deep cognitive focus per day. Your brain simply burns too much energy to sustain anything more than that. So if you're just starting out trying to train your attention, your biological limit right now might literally be just 1 hour a day. And you know what? That is perfectly fine. Start with a single 60-minute block. We're not aiming for perfection here. We're aiming for steady, sustainable adaptation.
And the ultimate tool for that adaptation is strategic time blocking. The academic consensus in that journal paper we mentioned earlier really highlights that carving out just 90 to 120 minutes every day to focus on one important thing is literally enough to counteract that whole reactive work paradigm. Simply blocking this time off on your calendar and then defending it like your life depends on it with those digital barriers and social contracts is exactly how you transition from being a victim of your overflowing inbox to becoming an architect of your own output. It's how you finally reclaim your mental space.
So, if there's one crucial takeaway from this explainer, it's this. Focus isn't just about trying harder or having more discipline, it is about intentional design. If you don't structure your environment, the distractions of the modern world are absolutely going to structure it for you. So I want to leave you with this thought to chew on. Take a look at your calendar for tomorrow. Are you managing your time, or is your time managing you? And when you finally implement these systems and take back those lost hours, what meaningful work will you choose to do with your reclaimed time? Thanks so much for learning with me today.